Sundance Film Festival, Tribeca, Toronto, kind of around the world. Kahane is also the co-founder of Women in Negotiation. It's a nonprofit organization where she's the CEO, and it's expanding from a once-a-year summit to a round-the-year operation. So offers negotiating and coaching and workplaces and supportive community for professional women, helping them advance. So an accomplished guest here. And today, Daniella is going to speak about Columbia Unbecoming, Then and Now. Has anti-Semitism grown roots at Columbia University? And for those of you who don't know, I believe it was in 2004, Daniella and a group of students, and she'll explain the whole story better than I will, and some community organizers did this film at Columbia, sort of in the classroom, depicting anti-Semitism from professors. Anti-Semitism from professors. Think about that. There's no other group that would be tolerated, that this would come from professors. Overt forms of other bigotry and hatred would not be tolerated. But when it came to the anti-Semitism of professors in the classroom, this was the beginning of the war against the Jewish people in the United States and around the Western world. This explosion of anti-Semitism started in the classroom from our colleagues. And when Daniella and her team did this film, they were dismissed, as many of us in this room in different spaces and in different ways, for being right-wing, for being advocates of Zionism and fascism, etc., etc. And unfortunately, Daniella was ahead of her time. So it's really an honor that she's here and can update us on one of the key battlefields of Columbia, where a lot of this is started and is spreading. So thanks for coming all the way to be with us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Small. Thank you for having me. It was really basheret, as we say in Hebrew, that I happened to meet you a few weeks ago for a documentary that I'm working on now, which is actually sort of a follow-up to Columbia Unbecoming, and I'm going to show you actually a teaser for that film as well. And I'm so happy to be here today also with my cousin, who is a student at Columbia today, and is going to be able to share his experience as well. But before I kind of jump into it, I'm just curious, because I just got here yesterday with my husband. Thank you for being here with me. And I'm curious kind of just to get to know a little bit about who you are in this room today. And so by show of hands, how many of you here are professors? How many of you here are students? How many of you here are affiliated with Columbia? Oh, that's more than I thought. How many of you here have experienced personally anti-Semitism? Wow. Wow. How many of you here, if not having had experienced, have witnessed anti-Semitism? It's pretty much everybody. And how many of you here have felt that they had to hide a piece of themselves to fit in within their university? Yeah, I would expect that would be everybody. Great. Well, let me start by saying, as you heard, I'm a filmmaker, a Peabody Award-winning filmmaker. I'm a mother of 3 girls who one day, hopefully, probably in about 10 years from now, will go off to pursue their own higher education. And I'm here because I'm very worried, much probably like all of you. I'm here because I'm very worried about the rising tides of anti-Semitism. I'm worried about the future of Israel and the precariousness of her position in a region in which she is constantly under threat and attack. And I'm worried about the deafening false narrative which is drowning out all reason and logic, in which Israel is seen solely as an apartheid, racist, colonial state, in which Jews are cast as the new Nazis, and therefore resistance by any means necessary is not only necessary, but morally upstanding. I am worried about the overwhelming buy-in from our youth of this narrative, and what that means for the future of my children, and for the future of Israel, and for Jews around the world. I am worried about the health of our education systems, which, along with the proliferation of social media's echo chamber and deep fakes, have inculcated a new generation with hatred for the only true liberal democracy in the Middle East, and even with hatred for their own country, a country which affords them the right to dissent, the right to free speech, the right to hate. I am worried about the violence we are seeing erupting in the streets, the defamation of our public libraries, our national monuments, the symbols of the defining values of freedom and democracy which we hold so dear, the burning of Israeli and American flags in the streets, not only in Iran or in Gaza, but in the US and in Europe. I'm worried about the health of my alma mater, Columbia University, and what it represents for all higher education. And I am worried because 20 years ago, as Dr. Small mentioned, I was a young, naive, optimistic, and idealistic student. I called out a problem in which students were being intimidated and abused for not towing the line politically with their professors at Columbia. And mostly, it fell on deaf ears. And that is why I am here with you today. So, as I said, I'm not an academic, but 20 years ago, I spotted a very disturbing issue and tried to communicate around it. And clearly, 20 years later, things have gotten way worse. And so I'm here today to talk about what needs to happen so that in 20 years from now, we're not even worse than where we are today. And hopefully, we're in a better place for my kids, for your kids, for the future of all of us. So we're going to start. Is this clicker? I actually don't know how to use this thing. Any idea? Is it just...
Did you tee it up?
I don't know. Ah, there we go. Okay, so yeah, this is Columbia University's motto. In thy light shall we see light. Obviously, a darkness has really overcome my two tenets of the motto. Okay. And no, wrong way. Okay, so we're going to start with a teaser. We're going to then watch the film Columbia Unbecoming. We're going to talk to my cousin Noam, who is, I hope I got your year right. Yeah. Okay, and then we can have a conversation. So here's the teaser. Where do we put it? There should be a button to put it on the screen. Right. Is there somebody who is that? Do you have the ability to play it from the back? No.
They're just cameras and the microphone on the table.
Like there's no way to get this. Nope. You know what? I wonder if it didn't actually. No, that's the video.
There's a special way to embed videos.
Right. So you know what? It probably did not.
Did you embed it?
I did embed it, but it might not have transferred over when I sent it to her.
Yeah.
So let's see. I have it on Vimeo, so I can, yeah, maybe I can go into Vimeo.
Is this connected to Wi-Fi?
Oh, it's.
Oh, okay. So this this
That one's
TV is
set.
working,
Okay,
and then
let's try
one's
that
just
one.
mirroring what this one's doing.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. Go to. Is there a way to like send a link? Oh, it works. Yay!
So use this one.
Okay, you have the volume.
Everybody just be quiet. No, you're going the wrong way. Is it this one? Yeah, that one. This one. Or the trailer. No, the trailer. Sorry. You just have to click play right here. Right here. Okay?
It's okay. That one's just mirroring, so it's
That
not
was
gonna-
our problem. Thank you.
They just need to be quiet.
Can we turn off the lights? Yeah, we could play it. Okay. Okay. Sorry about the delay.
Here. You can take it for her. Take it off the thing.
Okay, sorry about the delay. We are all queued up now. Images I'm sure will be familiar to you. Oh, louder. It doesn't get louder? That's not good.
Do you have subtitles?
Okay. If they can't hear it, we'll just skip it. I don't think they're going to be able to hear it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's the one.
Wait. Everybody, my car has been deactivated. Why? I'm also touching it. Why can't I do it? No. Speak out loud so that you can hear me. No, I am a professor here. I have every right to be everywhere on campus. You cannot let people that support Hamas on campus and me, a professor, not go on campus. Let me in now. We just want to be Jewish in public. Listen. I was not expecting this. This is not. I don't even know. On October 8th or 9th or 10th, what would have happened if Colombia's president took a strong stance and wrote a letter saying that what Hamas did is wrong, period, this is atrocious, period, supporting this is horrible, period. We would have been in a very different world. I put the blame on
over 7, I felt like a Columbia student that was also Jewish and was also a Zionist. Now I feel like a Jewish Zionist that is also a Columbia student.
The consensus on campus was the innocent civilians in Israel were at fault for what happened.
When the majority of students rally around a cause, it doesn't matter whether you're right or wrong.
There was a letter by Students for Justice in Palestine that was published on October 9th, and it celebrates justified excuses, the rape, the murder, the kidnapping, the torturing.
We stand in full solidarity with Palestinian resistance against over 75 years of Israeli settler colonialism and apartheid. Any rhetoric of an unprovoked Palestinian attack is shamefully misleading.
What are they about their response? We're still seeing the videos online. They're not just protesting, they're celebrating.
I want this message to get to every parent who sends their kids to Columbia University. We cannot protect your children from pro-terror student organizations because the president of Columbia University will not speak out against pro-terror student organizations.
This is hatred for who we are. The president of the school doesn't care.
Repeat after me! Repeat after me! We have Zionists! We have Zionists! Who have entered the camp! Who have entered the camp!
Zionists, they don't deserve to live comfortably, let alone Zionists don't deserve to live.
It was never about that side, but they were able to shift so many people into radicalism now. Very small chance that this will be kept. And that small chance is the reason we have to defend.
Friends of mine that on October 9th were asking me, what's going on in the Middle East? Like, I heard there's a war, I heard there are hostages, like what's happening, what's Hamas? And those same friends are now walking around screaming for an intifada revolution.
But you know, the other thing is, everywhere we go, someone comes up to him and says, your daddy is a hero. And he's saying that we're going through something really, really difficult. He doesn't fully understand it, but he understands that it's scary. And he's seeing you doing something incredible.
Jewish or non-Jewish, Israeli or non-Israeli, we all deserve to be here. We all deserve to exist, and Israel has a right to exist. Thank you very much.
hating Jews in the state of Israel, October 7th gave permission to come out of that closet with a sense of accomplishment. But what we're seeing after October 7th, to start on October 8th, at Columbia, there has been an issue in terms of how they allow academic freedom to be hijacked in order to pursue ideological positions.
I can't help but think they're influenced by a lot of faculty members who are spreading terrible things. And you know, this is what generation do to you. They weren't alive for 9/11 and we're too young to remember.
I believe that the students do not see themselves as anti-Semitic. It's just, they drink the wine, and anti-Semitism is really wine. Just like many people believe that they are not racist, but they live in a racist environment, and they get that from the environment. People don't feel like they can express their points of views in class.
We interviewed Jewish students, and they shared firsthand encounters with faculty who truly were creating a hostile environment, but university administrators did not take the issues seriously. This is 2004 in New York City at Columbia University. Now, fast forward 20 years later, you can see the foundation was very clearly laid.
If you do not believe in Israel's righteousness, you can choose to go and major in the Middle Eastern studies. You will take 4 years of classes without hearing or meeting a proud Israeli or unapologetic Israeli Jew. But you will be hearing things about how horrible those people are. So now, when you do meet them on campus, you already see them as a one the devil, and you hate them.
There's this very binary dichotomy between oppressor and the oppressed.
There's this Mickey Mouse story where the oppressed people can't do wrong because they're oppressed. And if you're an oppressor, you can't do right.
In this equation, Israel is perceived as a white imperialist outpost that has displaced a dark-skinned, native, indigenous, authentic people, i.e. the Palestinians. It is very flattened, there is no complexity, it is extremely superficial. It's been a very steady, focused, strategic effort in order to have this long-term sort of goal and objective of influencing American hearts and minds. Anti-Semitism is becoming socially acceptable in the 21st century. When I was a graduate student and I was following the money, I quickly had a crash course, basically, in which I started to understand that there were foreign governments who are influencing not only who teaches, but actually what will be taught.
We have a small number of alumni in Qatar who have given some gifts for annual gifts to schools. Very small number, but almost
Unreported foreign funding of universities by Qatar and other authoritarian governments has linked to higher levels of campus anti-Semitism and the decline of free speech norms.
For a lot of these organizations who are receiving these funds, it's viewed as being a positive. Well, why don't we know where the money's coming from? What's the terms of agreement? There are strategic decisions that are being made that will influence the next generations.
been fed this entire narrative. If they're saying, let's burn it all down.
When we have individuals standing there saying, here's for Palestine, here's for Gaza, we have hit a moment of uncertainty.
On October 11th, Muhammad Abdu posted, "I'm with Hamas and Hezbollah and Islamic Jihad." And yet, Columbia hired this individual as a professor. He will never work at Columbia.
I'm right with that, I'm on fire, I'm on top of the matter, I'm never on the camera, all right?
War Peace comes in and we're met with. What we are ultimately seeing are individuals who have been certainly brainwashed.
There's nothing they can do to silence our movement. Like, we will always be here no matter how many leaders they take down, more people will come up.
They've been indoctrinated.
The curtain has been pulled, and I can't unclose. I've seen the people, and I don't know if we ever go to see them.
Dozens of protesters have barricaded themselves inside a building at Columbia University in New York.
So fast forward is it's not too hard. Sometimes it's too hard. Yes, I know. Yeah.
So I assume that most of you have seen the footage, of this and understand the problem and are as horrified as I am. But the question is, how many Americans, how many people who are not touched by this daily in their own lives, the kids that are exposed to this right now, who are Jewish, who are watching, kind of the news closely, or who are in the social media bubble, how many people really understand what's at stake here? And obviously, because of my experience 20 years ago, and because of what I've seen unfold over the last 20 years, I'm making this current film now because I want to reach those people. I'm gonna try and just move on from here. Oh, no.
They said, put your microphone by the speaker. Put the,
So now we're gonna watch Columbia Unbecoming. How many of you have seen Columbia Unbecoming? No. Oh wow, amazing. Where did you see it?
So I'm like you, I was an undergraduate student, and I was at a different university, but Avi Goldwasser, who is actually the one who made the film, the first film.
With me.
He interviewed me, but I wasn't a Columbia student. I've been involved with Avi's work.
Incredible. What's your name?
Naya.
Naya, nice to meet you.
Could you use the hand?
Okay. It's a very angry microphone. I don't know if I should use this. Okay, so Yael, you want to tell everybody how you saw Columbia Unbecoming?
We overlapped. We didn't know each other, but we overlapped as undergraduates at Columbia. Several close friends were featured in the film, and so I had seen it in support of them after they told me to never take any courses in the Middle Eastern language and culture department. I think about the film so often because I remember thinking, really categorizing it as like this is a fringe group of bad actors in one department, and not seeing the long-term strategy. So, yeah, I'm glad everyone else will be able to see it as well.
Thank you. So basically, let me give you a little bit of context. 20 years ago, as an undergrad, I was a student at Barnard, and I was the president of the pro-Israel group on campus. And students were coming to me out of the woodwork and saying, hey, I had this really bad experience in the Middle East Studies classroom. This professor said X, Y, and Z to me. I know that's not right. I know that doesn't, kind of feel right. That shouldn't happen in the classroom. Or I'm a straight A student, all of a sudden I'm getting Ds. What do I do? And so as a student, I said, okay, there's probably a process here that we can tap into. Why don't you go speak to the Ombuds office? And the Ombuds office at Columbia then sent them back to the department chair, and the department chair would then send them back to their professor, and it was just this big loop. And so, as I said before, I was naive, and I said, well, you know what? The administration must not be aware of this problem, which is clearly systemic, and let's communicate with them. And so, as students, we didn't have resources. We barely had money to bring in chips and popcorn to our meetings. And so we reached out to what was then called the David Project, Charles Jacobs and Avi Goldwasser, and they generously said, we will support this initiative and we'll make this film with you. And so we found students who were willing to speak up about their experiences, some of whom, as you'll see in the film, only agreed to do it if their faces and their voices were were protected. And we prepared what I would say is not really a documentary, but a documentation of student testimonials about their instances of abuse or bias or intimidation in the Middle East Studies classroom. And at that time, you're right, it was siloed. It was really kind of, this is a problem in the Middle East Studies department. It was called MELAC at the time. This is not pervasive to campus. Obviously today it is. So we created this documentation. We screened it to the president of Columbia, President Bollinger, the provost, and this was the spring semester, my junior year, I believe, and they said nothing. They said, thank you very much, we'll get back to you. Fast forward, the summer comes, everybody's off campus. They think by the time the spring comes back, the fall semester comes back, they will have forgotten about it. I had also, unbeknownst to them, screened it to the president of Barnard, Judith Shapiro, who I had a relationship with. And she said, this is horrifying. If these allegations are true, this is a serious problem. We need to do something about this. And she ended up speaking about it publicly at a big conference, and there was press in the room, not knowing that this was off the record. And so the press started writing about it. And that was when we said, okay, we need to represent this film publicly. We need to take this public. We need to make sure that people understand what's going on. At the time, we were unwilling to say, this is about anti-Semitism. And that just shows you, 20 years ago, the general kind of culture was so unwilling to say, you know what, this anti-Semitism is anti-Zionism and vice versa. We said, you know what, let's frame this through a universal lens. Let's talk about this in a way that everybody can understand. And so we spoke about it through the lens of academic freedom. That students deserve academic freedom, especially in a power dynamic where they're reliant upon their professors for grades and recommendations, et cetera, et cetera. So with that, I will screen the film and we can talk about it after.
arrived on campus, and I was looking through the course packets, and I saw the Arab-Israeli conflict, and I saw passing in Israeli culture and politics, and I got really excited because I can learn about all of these things and get credit for it. And so I was looking through all these different courses, and a friend of mine said, you know, that's probably not a good idea. Jewish life on campus. But for students who want a comfortable environment in which to talk about Israel and the Middle East, there's a problem. And different people have experienced the problem in different ways, but it's not just a few isolated incidents or a few concerned students. It's a situation where students who want an honest discussion of the Middle East on campus are being silenced. And it's a problem that starts with professors.
There's definitely an intimidation factor. People don't feel like they can express their points of views in classrooms or in their assignments for professors.
I didn't realize also at the time how many incidents actually were happening on campus at the same time. So I thought, oh my God, I had this terrible isolated incident. It must be me. I really thought that, which unfortunately, now I'm a strong, confident woman, and you know, when I hear about these kind of things with other people, I'm like, should have said something, come on, you know better than that. But at the time I thought, listen, I don't want to get this professor in trouble.
I think the administration is not responsive to what's going on campus because it doesn't see it so much as a threat. It's intellectually popular and justified nowadays to criticize Israel and to question its legitimacy.
In the time that I spent at MELAC, I had some really amazing professors who I think really did their best to foster open dialogue, including George Al-Haj, Tawfiq ibn Amma, who read a very sensitive book, and I think he really handled it really well. At the same time, though, I had some really, really bad experiences.
I'd say the last 5 years of my work, I began to hear criticisms and comments from our students, particularly about the MELAC department. And I would say to students many times, you have to understand that if you're approaching this as an academic, one has to see it through the norms of scholarship. What was different about the few people we've been speaking about here is that their objectivity was questioned because of their activism and advocacy, and also some of the exchanges with students which are being documented in this film, which meant that some of the faculty really were intimidating when they got questions which they felt represented a non-pro-Arab, pro-Palestinian point of view. How does a professor really handle representing an academic discipline in the classroom and to become an advocate outside before alma mater on campus walking around? And when I wrote that up in The Spectator, I thought it was a rather benign and appropriate question. The reaction, candidly, was astounding. There were two pieces that were written, one by Professor Debashi, the other one by Professor Saliba, which attacked me personally. One of them said it's like I'm starting the Spanish Inquisition, and that I am, no rabbi has the right to question the principles of academic freedom. What was written about me in Spectator by these two faculty indicates that here I am, an older person, rabbi, etc. I had been at this university, I think, 32 years. And these two attacked me personally. And believe me, it rolls over my back, doesn't hurt me personally at all. But if that's not an example of intimidation, they said to me, Rabbi, don't even preach, don't even dare to teach. So if this is what they're willing to do to me in public, in writing, you can imagine what they're willing to do to students in the classroom.
The professors who do deal with the Middle East tend to shift focus from those grievances of Middle Eastern regimes to what's happening in Israel. It never really has to do with the real abuses of human rights, much more severe abuses of human rights that happen in countries such as Sudan and Syria and Egypt and on and on and on.
I took Professor Saliba's Intro to Islamic Civilization at the end of the semester. I guess the icing on the cake was that we saw a video about contemporary politics in the Middle East. And without any framing at all, we witnessed a video that showed a march of Arabs from the region, and a new march in which they hold up banners that say death to Zionism, and they chant slogans like death to Jews. While that may be an accurate portrayal of what goes on in the Middle East, I was kind of surprised that he didn't frame it with anything like, this is not my perspective, or what you're going to see here may bother you a little bit.
In the spring of my freshman year, I took a course called Contemporary Islamic Civilization with Professor George Saliba. One day I walked into class and he started a speech. He was on stage in front of the class. His face was red with anger. He was shouting. He said, this is a course in contemporary Islamic civilization, and I can't get more contemporary than the events that are unfolding right now in the Middle East. He said that he's well aware of Ariel Sharon's history, which is one that includes Sabra and Shatila, and that he knows that another Sabra and Shatila is taking place right now in Jenin. He said that Sharon was obviously trying to hide the massacre that he's committing. He said that class was canceled, and he invited the class to follow him to the local library steps where a Palestinian sit-in was taking place. During his speech, he didn't stop to take any questions or comments. Honestly, no student would think of asking a question in the atmosphere that this professor created. That was a pretty scary experience because I realized that all of these students who don't know any better are sitting in a course being told something by a professor who they are assuming knows what he's talking about and is a credible source. I took a class with George Saliba, the Introduction to Islamic Civilization. Towards the end of the semester, Professor Saliba showed what I felt was an anti-Israel film, showing the contemporary conflict between Palestinians and Israelis, with a very one-sided view. The film and Saliba presented a view that Arabs have a prior claim to the land of Israel. And I felt very differently about that, and I was sure to express my opinion. For a few minutes, we discussed it inside the classroom, and then George Saliba sort of drew me outside the classroom and told me to walk with him on his way out. And on our way out, we actually stood on College Walk, right outside, for 45 minutes, where I debated with him about the fact that the Jewish people have been in Israel for thousands of years. And he said, you have no voice in this debate. So I said, of course I'm allowed to express, my opinion. See, you have green eyes. He said, you're not a Semite. He said, I'm a Semite. I have brown eyes. He said, you have no claim to the land of Israel. As if my ancestors were not there. As if I'm not really a Jew because I have green eyes. I was stunned and never approached him after that, and that's exactly what he wanted to do. He wanted to intimidate me and keep me quiet. And I was. I'm an alumna, and now I am sort of removed from the incident. I'm not afraid of Saliba anymore, and it's all about the intimidation factor. I finally feel comfortable to discuss it for the sake of future graduates and future students who this might happen to. Let them know, A, they're not alone, and this happened to me, and that they have to speak up.
I did go to Professor Saliba after I had completed the course. My basic first question was something like, Professor, why is it that we've been in the class a whole year and we've been talking about the Middle East, and every time Israel comes up, it's been referred to as Palestine, which is not really a politically accurate term. And I'm not even sure if I finished my sentence completely until, by the time he had already started with, oh, so that's the accent that you have to find. Why is Israel being called Palestine in my class? What about the plight of the Palestinians? Why isn't that what you're talking to me about? Why do you come to me and ask me why we aren't trying to help the Palestinians in the Middle East? So immediately I was under attack from my professor. His kind of escape route of saying, well, you're inconsiderate, and he did use the word inconsiderate to the plight of the Palestinians, that didn't really work because he had still done something wrong in the classroom, and he escalated into some yelling, and he proceeded to give me the following analogy. He says, these are preemptive strikes. If I got up to hit you right now, and he starts moving out of his chair, if I got up to hit you, would you hit me first? And I said, moving my chair back slowly, I said, no, I wouldn't hit you first. I would walk away from you and say, until you're ready to talk, I'm not ready to reciprocate. And just the use of rhetoric, the use of yelling, the whole situation was really uncomfortable. Really, without any warning at all. After he had gotten me into a very emotional place, after he was all worked up, he basically kicked me out. I'm sorry, I can't talk to you anymore about this. You have to go. I have students waiting to talk to me. And I walked out of the door, which had been open the entire time, and I just saw his secretarial staff, and I was wide open, shocked.
Another incident that occurred that made me feel somewhat uncomfortable occurred with Professor Andre's class. It was the day before Palestinian incident. He did not cancel class. He had us all come to class. And he then proceeded to give us a 15-minute speech about how there's an important text happening in College Law, we should all go read it. Essentially, telling us to go to the Palestinian incident. And then he canceled class. And we said, wait a second, you called us here in the first place. You didn't send us an email, told us no, don't show up because I'm going to the incident because this is my personal, feeling. But let's discuss what you're doing. Let's discuss the issue. He said no discussion and he left. So I just felt like that was totally inappropriate for a college environment.
I took a class called Palestinian Israeli Politics and Societies, taught by Professor Joseph Massad. And I was very excited for the class because I wanted to educate myself on all facets of the situation, and I didn't want to keep my focus on what I learned from my high school background, so I was excited to get a new perspective and to learn about politics from a different perspective. And I quickly came to realize on the very first day of class that this was going to be a very biased class, only showing a strong anti-Israel perspective. I renamed the class to myself, Why Israel is Racist. He was teaching the class about the Jenin incidents, and the girl raised her hand and tried to bring up an alternative point of view, and before she could get her point across, he quickly demanded and shouted at her, "I will not have anyone sit through this class and deny Israeli atrocities," which pretty much limited the student's ability even to question him or to bring up an alternative point of view.
professor, he has very good English, he gave a very good lecture. There were about 20, 30 people in the room. But throughout the lecture, I realized that he missed a lot of points. Certain aspects of the Israeli-Palestinian history were just not there. Others were emphasized. I wouldn't call it lies, but they were half-truths. At the end of his lecture, I raised my hand and I wanted to ask him some questions about the things that he missed. And basically, I raised my hand and said, hello, my name is Tommy, I'm from Israeli, and I would like to ask you some questions. And before I could continue, he stopped me and said, you Israeli from Nigeria? I said, yes. So his next question was, how many Palestinians did you kill? I was shocked because I didn't came there with any antagonism or any bias towards him. And I asked him, how come it's relevant to this discussion? And he said, no, it's relevant, and I meant that you can answer how many Palestinians did you kill? And I said, I'm not going to answer, but I'm going to ask you a question. How many members of your family celebrated on September 11th? If you're starting to stereotype. And then he blew up and he started yelling, and the entire room just everybody yelled at everybody, and basically the discussion was over at that point. Joseph Assad is probably one of the most dangerous intellectuals or self-proclaimed intellectuals, I guess. Not for the great majority of his views, but for the fact that he used it.
Okay, so I'm going to stop this here. I hope you're a little bit short on time, and I want to have time for the conversation, and then for us to have a conversation. As you can see, this film is on YouTube, so you definitely can find it and finish it. We've got 2 minutes left. So, without further ado, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Noam, as I mentioned, just finished his first year at Columbia. He has been obviously in the thick of it. Is this working? Does this? There was another one, but he took it away. I don't know if this helps. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Over the year, so Noah is also my cousin, which is amazing. I think you must have been in diapers when that film was made.
Wasn't even born. A year born.
A year. He was a baby. He's a triplet. And it's pretty surreal for me to, watch this film, which I honestly haven't seen in its entirety in a very long time. And also to be sitting here with you. I remember when you were a baby and this was my reality. And now 20 years later, you're immersed at Columbia University, having had a very, very difficult year. Can you share with us a little bit about what your expectations were of Columbia and how potentially things changed once you got there or after October 7th?
Yeah. So I went to Ramaz High School in New York City, and I go to a school where the Ivy Leagues are kind of pushed on you. There's a very competitive culture to get into one of the top schools in the country, especially at Ramaz. And since sophomore year, I was eyeing Columbia for a couple reasons. One, my mom went to Barnard and my dad went to Columbia, and they told me they had an amazing time there. I also visited a couple times. I met Jews from the school, and I felt like there was a very warm community there. I also wanted to hedge my bets, and in my school, if you're a legacy, you basically apply to that school because it's so competitive around the Ivy League culture. And when I got in senior year, I was thrilled. I was beyond ecstatic. I knew that Columbia had one of the most diverse campuses in the world. And to me, that's a huge thing because I love meeting non-Jews. I love meeting people from different countries. In fact, some of my best friends are international students, whether they're Ukrainian or Bulgarian or Mexican. So it's been really cool, kind of being exposed to a diverse range of people. I will say though that I was very disappointed after October 7th because I realized that all these anti-Semitic sentiments that I assumed about Columbia, were 10 times worse than I could have ever imagined. To give a little bit of perspective, SJP, the Students for Justice in Palestine group at Columbia, wasn't active before October 7th. On the morning of October 6th, they posted that they're coming back, and they posted on Instagram a picture of Israel with red all over the land. I guess, implying bloodshed. I'm suspicious now if they even knew about the attack beforehand. And, you know, I and another friend wanted to look more into this, but being blacklisted by SJP, we can't really engage with these people, unfortunately. So on October 9th, I saw hundreds, if not thousands, of kids gathered on the lawn celebrating October 7th. For me, this was a very emotional day. I have a lot of friends in Israel. I have a lot of family in Israel. I also have people very close to me who are in the IDF. I actually met one of the hostages last year at a soccer game. I sat next to Hersh Goldberg Poland for an hour and just talked about life with him, and he was a very sweet guy. I don't know him super well, but just knowing that everyone at my school was celebrating the rape of my people, the abduction of people that I knew, you know, just the complete suffering of my people and my family and my friends was very disheartening. What I saw in the coming days was honestly surreal. It's hard to talk about Colombia because there are so many instances that I want to talk about, and I really can't talk about all of them. I feel like every single day there was a new instance of anti-Semitism or a new instance of anti-Israel bias, but the anti-Semitism is the real issue, and as someone who was there, I can tell you guys that this is not about Israel. This is a front. Israel is a complete facade for the hate that's harbored by my classmates. And I can talk a bit about that later, or I can talk about that now. Up to you with how you want to direct this interview.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah. So for starters, so I took this class this year called University Writing, and one of the things that we were discussing in class was the diversity of thought, and if we believe that Columbia upholds these standards. And when I was called on to speak, I said that I actually don't believe that Columbia is committed to the diversity of thought. I believe that Jewish voices are silenced quite routinely. I believe that, you know, this isn't just institutionalized anti-Semitism. Sorry, that this isn't just anecdotes of anti-Semitism, but in fact institutionalized anti-Semitism, because we have teachers in the Middle Eastern Studies Department, which was, you know, outlined in this documentary, who are vehemently anti-Israel and anti-Jewish. I was actually, you know, seeing this today, it shocked me because Mossad 20 years ago was such a violent anti-Semite, and then you see today that he does the same things. You know, after the Hamas attack, Mossad said that these were exhilarating and awesome attacks. And not
Mossad
just,
was not tenured.
He wasn't even tenured, yeah.
When we made this film, he then, in 2008, 2009, I believe, received tenure. Obviously, there was a campaign to prevent him from receiving tenure, but he did anyway, and you see.
And in addition to, you know, the teachers being anti-Semites, it's also the deans. So I met with a bunch of deans this year to discuss my opinions on the anti-Semitism on campus. They told me that they think I'm being sentimental, that I'm being dramatic, that it's not actually as bad as we perceive it, and that we have to be exposed to diversity of opinion. To which I told them I spent a year on a gap year in Israel where I met Palestinians routinely. I went to a school in the West Bank. I played soccer with East Jerusalem Palestinians 3 times a week. I learned Arabic from an Arab-Israeli teacher who was living in Haifa throughout the year. So I told them, you know, I've been exposed to a diversity of opinions, and they told me that, you know, I have to check my comfort and my privilege a bit, which was definitely upsetting. But it's not just, you know, it's not just the deans or the teachers, it's also just students and random people around campus. When I was entering the gates of 116th, a man actually approached me and asked me how many Palestinians I'd killed that day. I was wearing a Jewish star. That's all I was wearing. You know, and the chorus cries that we're weaponizing anti-Semitism, but that we're weaponizing anti-Semitism and conflating anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, but there my only crime was the Jewish star I was wearing, separate from Israel completely. That man then proceeded to rip down and abducted one of the posters of the hostages. I asked him why he ripped it down, and he told me because, you know, these aren't hostages, these are people who are rightfully detained until further notice. To which I told him, how can you say that about innocent civilians who were, you know, killed and taken from their homes? And he said, well, you actually hold Palestinians incorrect. You're wrongfully holding Palestinians in prisons. I said, what do you mean me? I'm an American Jewish student. So I think the blame that they put on Jews for what's happening in Israel is ridiculous. I think the double standards they hold against Israel is ridiculous. But there are so many instances of anti-Semitism where it's not even related to Israel that it makes you start questioning how much of this is really about Israel itself.
Yeah, so would you say that things really shifted post-October 7th?
Absolutely. I have classmates who don't speak to me anymore. Columbia has a core curriculum. They basically give every student the same 4 or 5 classes. In one of those core curriculum classes that I took called Literature Humanities, my partner was a Norse pagan who identified with she/they pronouns, which is of course fine, but and you know, of course acceptable. But that person on October 7th held a sign that said, "Resistance is justified by any means necessary." Sorry, on October 8th, And to me, that was disgusting to look at because I know that this person would have been treated in unspeakable ways by Hamas. That person didn't speak to me for the rest of the year. I was given dirty looks every time I entered class just for wearing my Magen David, just for wearing a Bring Them Home necklace. And yeah, there are several more instances besides that, but that's one that particularly shocked me just because of the identity of that person.
So I wanted to say something. So first of all, thank you both very much. Maybe we can get applause for the work you're doing in this presentation. We have 20 minutes, but you guys are in a room. We have Wiesel King scholars. These are young undergraduates, even high school students and master students. So they're Elie Wiesel, Martin Luther King scholars dealing with these issues of anti-Semitism. They're here to learn and create projects to bring back to their home university. And the other people in this room are predominantly professors. So I want to make one point and then I have a question for both of you. The first point, I think what you were saying, Daniella, is really important, that in 2004, to make the connection between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism was politically impossible.
Yep.
Think about it.
Yep.
And the discourse by the intellectual environment was that to be critical of Israel or even anti-Israel was not necessarily anti-Semitic. In 2005, I wrote an article with Ed Kaplan from Yale, and what we did, we interviewed 10,000 people from 10 European countries. We asked them a series of questions about Israel and classical forms of anti-Semitism, and to make a long story short, we made the correlation or the connection between classical anti-Semitism and what we call Israel bashing. So the people who bashed Israel in our study were more than 13 times more likely to be anti-Semitic in the classical sense. And this scientific proof laid the groundwork for adopting the connection in the IRA definition. So we were the first to scientifically prove the connection. Wow. And I'll just tell you a quick story. My parents have big Shabbat dinners in Montreal. I'd go up to Montreal. There were 25 people around the table. And when we published the article in the newspapers, because put it up in the New York Times, etc., the Guardian, the Monde. And my mother, married at 17 years old, brilliant woman, but never finished school. She started a family young. And she said, everyone at the table would be quiet. And she said, Charles, I'm very proud of you. Heard that you did this paper, but it's very mathematical. It's difficult to understand. Can you explain it? So I just explained to her on the table, with everybody, and I just explained to you. So she said, and how long did you work on the project? So I said, 2.5 years. And what was the budget for the project? I told her. So she turns to the table and she says, my son, the professor. It took him all this money and all this time to prove what everybody here already knows. But this was the environment, and this is still the environment. And the other thing I wanted to mention, you mentioned in the film, and next week we'll have some of our team of forensic accountants who are doing the research on connecting the funding of the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood.
That's trippy.
Yosef Kawadawi, who started Islamic studies at Oxford University, the head of the spiritual head of the Muslim Brotherhood, who preached his whole life that the true believer needs to finish the work of Hitler. This is the guys who infiltrated our education from Islamic studies to Middle East studies. So our friends, some people from our forensic team will be there, and these are the guys that discovered tens of millions of dollars in the Brotherhood. My question to you guys, and maybe I'll start with you. To the professor, how do you deal with students? So if the professors are now going to deal with anti-Semitism, they're going to learn stuff here and create courses, and a student will stand up in the class and say, Israel is a settler colonial state, and how can you make the connection to anti-Semitism? And they'll start the rhetoric. What would your advice be to the professors? How to handle the situation? How to teach in this environment which is now pervasive? How to teach about anti-Semitism?
How would I do that?
Yeah.
So I'm not a teacher, so I feel like I can't speak perfectly on this, but I can say that.
You have great experience and insights.
In the classroom.
Yeah. So I mean, from what I understand at Columbia specifically, is that there's, I think one of the biggest issues is just misunderstanding Jewish identity. I think that people need to accept it as a fact, not just as a historical fact, but just a matter of fact that Jews are indigenous to Judea, that Jews have lineage traced back thousands of years to Israel, and that we are an indigenous people. So I think when we're specifically confronted with the settler colonialist claim, I think teachers should be saying that that claim is I think that claim is inherently anti-Semitic. And maybe the student isn't aware of the bias or the hate that they're harboring, but by denying Jewish identity, by denying the fact that, Jews have had families who have lived in Israel for thousands of years, that is, I think, a form of anti-Semitism. Because you can't be hijacking someone else's identity or, imposing your own view on it without actually asking them. And I think that's a major issue.
Wise words. Daniella, how would you,
Well,
given all your experience dealing with what's your advice to the professors?
First of all, I definitely agree with Noam, and I think one of the things that you're doing so brilliantly, and the reason why there's so much of a need for this very gathering, is that we've done a very poor job widening the frame on the narrative. When we limit it to this ticky-tape, tit-tat type of thing, where it's, Israel, the big bad colonialist bully, versus the poor Palestinians in Gaza, we are not seeing the bigger picture of who is spreading that narrative and where is that narrative coming from and what is the bigger objective of that narrative. And it's not obviously just to eradicate Israel. It starts with that, it doesn't end with that. And so I think that we need to be helping more people understand that that very kind of thing that students are obviously, kind of propagating, and certain professors are propagating, and has kind of led it through the university system, is a narrative coming from the Muslim Brotherhood, is a narrative coming from Iran, is a narrative coming from the countries that oppose the very values that we stand for and that universities stand for in their ideals.
Do you guys have any comments or questions? Shai? Please speak loud, sir. The fans are drowning everybody else.
I want to commend the two of you for the film and for heroically maintaining the population at Columbia University and being there, fighting the fight. I do have a couple of questions. You mentioned graduating from Ramaz. And I'm not talking about you and your family's got for the fiscal situation, but I'm just asking an open question. I would imagine that a lot of the graduates of Ramaz have parents who actually pay for their children's tuition to go to Columbia. But the majority of these Jewish kids do not get a full ride. So I'd like to establish, yes, some money comes from Qatar, but some money also comes from individual Jewish parents. I actually speak from the point of view of a parent. I live not far from Westchester County, New York, where a lot of the kids, basically grew up to know that they would like to go to Penn, to Harvard, to NYU. And I know how much for their parents that is an idol, sending the kids to Columbia. I think it's a question how much we are trying as Jews to put our money where our values are. And I also want to refer to the fact that there's Students for Justice in Palestine, but we also had a logo of the Jewish Voice for Peace.
Yes.
So to try to frame the debate, it sounds to me like this is a struggle or war, not between Jews and non-Jews, but rather between those who fight anti-Semitism and those who are fighting for anti-Semitism, but you have Jews on both sides.
Let's make an important footnote. In our research report, Students for Justice in Palestine recently published. In our report, 2023, on SJP, we show the connection of the funding, how SJP is connected to the Muslim Brotherhood, the AMP, and that JVP, Jewish Voices for Peace, are being funded by the same sources, i.e. the Muslim Brotherhood.
I don't want to take too much time, but
okay.
As a PhD student at the Jewish Theological Seminary, I took one class at Columbia in 2005 in the history department. Now I understand why I was harassed, berated by the students and the professor. The professor, by the way, announced tonight we have a Holocaust survivor, a Jehovah's Witness, who is going to come and speak. In other words, not a Jew, but I have to say the professor was Jewish. The professor at Columbia was Jewish.
Yeah.
Maya, then you guys first.
Yes, I just want to say that a few things. So in 2004, I was an undergraduate student at UC Santa Cruz. Maya, can you speak up a little bit? In 2004, I was an undergraduate student at UC Santa Cruz, and we saw the same
Absolutely.
universities. And so my concern
Yeah.
sometimes is when we go to Congress and we testify about the problems of, say, Penn or Yale or Harvard, this is endemic to higher education
Yep.
right now.
And,
So I just wanted to say-
and unfortunately, lower education too.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm going to build on that because I have a question for you, Daniella. Can you hear me?
Please speak
Yeah.
loud. It's the phones.
So I have a question about your upcoming film that's based on those comments, which is, thinking back on my last 20 years at Columbia from when I first saw this film and the scholarship activism of the legacy of Saeed, that at the time I very conveniently and maybe for my own sanity dismissed as fringe in the Middle
Yeah.
Eastern and in Iraq. I saw over the last 20 years, I was there again 10 years ago, started to become mainstreamed perceived cultural norms, and then is really mainstream in education, in gender studies, in anthropology, in places far beyond the Middle East, and it has now become ideological orthodoxy in many of these departments. And so you made a comment at the beginning about when you were making the film 20 years ago, about how you used the wider lens and put it in the universal. This was the first time I'd ever heard the term academic integrity and academic freedom, which, at 20 years old. And so I'm curious your take on making Poisoned Ivies about how you are balancing the universal orthodoxy that is we're being taught what to think, not just how to think by activists in the name of scholarship, versus the particularistic poison of anti-Semitism that is endemic. And so I'd be curious if you have a moment to touch on how you're balancing the tension in your upcoming film.
Okay, so I'm not quite understanding the question. So you're saying,
how much are you focusing on the hijacking of higher education with this more universalistic lens, and how much are you focusing
on anti-Semitism?
And I guess some of the question is audience. How are you balancing the audience of the university versus
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good question. It's very hard to kind of unentangle those two elements because the foreground, obviously, as we're seeing it in a post-October 7th world, is anti-Semitism. But the larger kind of hotbed of, kind of where this is being birthed or stewing is in an environment that has, over the last 40 years, essentially, made itself very hospitable to this monolithic thought, which then enables that spread of that poison. You're taking kind of a body that is already unhealthy and you're pumping this kind of poisonous thought into it. It's way more likely for that body to, kind of disintegrate, so to speak, through this analogy because of that. And I actually think the next slide, if I can go to it, kind of talks to that a little bit in terms of what is like the general climate that we are seeing, now, where this makes it so much more toxic, right? So you have, for students at least, this post-COVID reality where they have been starved of socialization, and where because of this movement, they immediately feel like that instant sense of community, not just community, but like real mission and cause, which I think is very thrilling and is very alluring. And then you have weaponization of student idealism, which clearly kind of is part of it in terms of students seeing themselves as underdogs, potentially. Here you have a group of, think of college students, they're leaving their houses for the first time. They themselves feel oppressed, and they're going out into the university. They're, for the first time, kind of independent, so to speak, and they hear genocide, and they obviously want to root for the underdog. And they see themselves in it. And we see this cause theater happening in universities across the country with the encampments, to the absurdity of, and Noam could speak to this, of students at Columbia saying, we're being starved, we're not getting our vegan food from the cafeteria, you're not letting it in, right? I mean, you could quote it better than I could. And then, you know, obviously the politicization of campus, whereby over the course of, like I said, you know, from 1970, I think the statistic is it was 3-2 left to right, and then from 2000 to 2015, it was 5-1, and now today it's 8-1. Whereby today, you know, hiring for new academic positions is centered on race and gender, and the subject matter needs to be, you know, kind of propagating a marginalized community. And then obviously DEI plays a role as well. And DEI kind of has become, I think there are two strands of DEI, but the more radicalized one is one which very much is a front for anti-Semitism.
So there's a lot of, so there's a testimony to your impact. Abdul-Rahim, Eddie, could you make or collect the 3 comments or questions? Very quickly, Abdul-Rahim.
No. We can't hear you. Yeah.
Any quick question?
Just a quick comment and question. Commenting that maybe we need to think about a lot of hard work through K through 12.
Yeah.
Because we need to be primed and immunized in order to go to any brainwashing institution, which is not just Columbia. And I wanted to report that I spoke to someone pretty high up in medical education who told me I was kind of putting my work in the wrong place, but this is just about elite schools, because we have people creating tremendous problems with the United States medicine. And so I think that idea of, yes, poison ivies, but to make it nice. Okay. So here's my question. We are trying so hard on the educational front. Premier, is this really about legal intervention? And do we need to get more savvy in a legal way to get the job done? Number 2 is, what would you say to us in regard to shifting the lens in our own educational work strategies in a post-October 7 world? Because I have to say, in my world, we're doing a little binder thing in medicine.
Yeah.
Very important question.
I need to remember this whole thing.
Yeah. Okay.
I have two questions for you. The first one is, do you think this is an issue of Jews not being able to define what their own anti-Semitism is, like other ethnic groups, you know, African Americans, African American Asians, or Asians get to define what upsets them, but Jews are not allowed, and how can we change that, in maybe through film or through airing it on a documentary? And my other question is, as Americans, and I write for an American Jewish publication, do you think things will change depending on the outcome of this election? Is it going to get worse? I mean, I think both scenarios could make it worse, and I would like to hear what you think as someone who's been dealing with this for, covering this for 20 years, and as a student.
Yeah. Okay. I just need to remember the first one that you answered, and then I can kind of attack all of them.
In Morocco, did you experience the Red Green Alliance at Columbia University?
The convergence between the radical Islam and, absolutely. But I think what's confusing to me about the convergence is that it seems like both sides are sacrificing a bunch of their ideals to meet at this convergence, right? So this is not Islamic ideology. I'm specifically talking about radical Islam, Islamism, but the Islamists will basically they'll basically use these useful idiots on the left who they don't agree with, whether it comes to progressive issues or gender identity or abortion or women's rights, they'll abandon all those issues in favor of their complete hatred for Jews. And then on the left, the very, very liberal classmates that I have who, are, green hair, piercings everywhere, which is fine. But what I'm trying to say is that the way that they express themselves will be completely rejected by the Islamists. And that's not something that they care about. They don't care about the rejection of their own identities in favor of hating Jews. And that's what's very concerning, because when those two sides converge, horseshoe theory becomes particularly alarming. And then when they converge, it's almost like, well, this left-wing anti-Semitism, this right-wing anti-Semitism, it's coming from everywhere and it's kind of circling in on us. And that's kind of what really scared me at Columbia this year, because I realized it doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum you're on or what certain values you have. What's going to take precedence always is the double standard, the demonization of Israelis, the double standard against Jews, the tropes that, we have too much money, we have too much power, etc. And yeah, I don't want to overspeak, but there are many instances where, the trope of too much power, too much money, too much influence is shown, not just by students who are anti-Semitic, but also deans. When one of the people at Halo spoke at a conference with the deans about the anti-Semitism at Columbia, the deans texted to each other in a group chat that's now leaked, writing, this is perfect fundraising opportunity, they're victimizing, there's a great way to exert influence on the school, leverage influence, etc. These are all very concerning things. Yeah. So the convergence is definitely something that I see. It definitely confuses me. The second question you asked was about shifting the lens post-October 7th, but what was the first? I just want to be able to answer that.
I was just saying about equal representation.
Yeah. So I think, not just at Columbia, but at every school, like you said, like you over there said, there's been a lot of instances like physical assault, which is very alarming. I think they're being underplayed in the media, but at Columbia, I can think of at least 5 off the top of my head. I had a friend who was choked. I had a friend who was pushed and then his flag was burned. One of my close friends was pinned against a wall and told to run. I have friends who were punched. I also, there's also an instance of a man shoving a Hamas flag in my face and saying, I'm on their side, I'm against you, you want to fight and see what I'm made of. So all these instances are kind of getting overlooked, and I think what's really concerning is that they're all such clear Title VI violations, right? So if the university has these codes of conduct that they're not adhering to, you start thinking, well, these institutions are lawless, maybe it's time for Jews to leave. So I think we need legal representation, of course, when it comes to the physical assault, when it comes to the Title VI violations. But I think the biggest issue that is really hard to address is just the ideological brainwash. Mm-hmm. Because in these academic institutions where there should be diversity of thought and there should be a gray area to discuss, which I did discuss during my gap year and I'm grateful for having discussed, it's just not even on the table. It's the binary that Israel can do no right and Palestinians can do no wrong. It's the victim complex. And granted, Palestinians are suffering, and they are victims in this case. But we have to start asking the questions, victims from who? Yes, victims from Israeli occupation in some cases. But you know what? What about victims of Hamas? What about, what about when the PA kidnaps a journalist and kills him, and then that gets no reports in the media a few days later? So all of these things I think need to be taught at schools. I think the ideology is the worst part, because these are our future leaders, especially at Columbia when there's so many people majoring in political science and majoring on those paths to get into politics. I think we'll see 20, 30 years down the line, or maybe even sooner, that our the political culture, the political climate in the U.S. will be even more hijacked by far left extremism, and that's an issue. Sorry.
We're out of time. Daniella, get the final response.
No, I don't think there's an easy answer here, obviously, and we're all here because we care and we want to grapple with these issues. And I put up a slide on potential course corrections. This is not the extent of it, obviously. In some ways, it's like there's a desire to say, let's just burn it all down and start over. We don't have that ability clearly, and so what we can do, though, is I think some of these things in terms of using our voice, empowering ourselves within our communities, reaching out to, people who are not, let's say, brainwashed, hopefully yet, or if they are, really talking them through, widening the narrative, understanding what's behind this discourse, and using the levers we can, whether it's legal, whether it's, kind of exposing transparency of funding, which obviously ISGAP is doing, or some of these other things. But I don't think there's an easy answer. I certainly don't have the answers. I just know that I need to do what is in my power as a documentarian, as a filmmaker, to hopefully communicate this to a larger audience and get outside the echo chamber.
And on that positive note, and really thank you both very much for being here.
Thank you.
And then, success on your very important
Thank you.
project.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us.